really highlights is a lot of the double standard I think that we see between men and women. This election season, I've seen a lot of female musicians get pressured to endorse and share their political alignment. Taylor Swift is one of them. Like, there was a lot of pressure put on her and lots of people talking about she hasn't endorsed Kamala yet. She hasn't endorsed Kamala yet. And like saying she's not going to because it's going to hurt her, or she should because it's going to help her. And just lots of discourse around that. I don't hear anyone asking who Drake is voting for. Like, who's talking about that? Nobody.
Hello, and welcome back to the Her First podcast. We are excited because our focus today in this episode and moving forward is going to be all about high achieving female identified persons. So oftentimes in our media, in our culture, we are seeing these influential people, women who take the stage, whether in business, through personal brand, as a celebrity, in the fame that they've created in some way. And through that story, they've experienced some sort of struggle, a challenge, pushback, cancel culture, whatever that looks like. And we're going to talk about their story, what they've dealt with, and how that is a part of our society, our culture, and what we have to deal with as women looking to make a name for ourselves, getting out into the world, and really making an impact. And with that impact, understanding how you can learn from their experiences.
And today we're talking all about Chappell Roan. And if you've been on the internet, been paying attention to music, listen to the radio, you've definitely heard one of her songs. This summer and into the fall, she's really blown up in terms of popularity as one of like the big pop stars of this year. It's really interesting to watch what's happened to her. Now, Chappell's been around actually for a while as an artist. She put out her first EP in 2017, and her album, The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess, actually debuted in 2023. So it's not a new album, but it just gained in a lot of popularity. Kind of this summer is when that popularity rose. The other really important thing to note about Chappell Roan is she really is a queer icon, talks openly about her relationships with women, and that's something we do not have a lot of representation for right now in music, is people who are very open and very honest about their sexuality and the experiences that they have. Now, in this sort of rise to stardom, she went from someone who was an artist, had fans, had a career, was doing concerts, and had some sense of success, but really blew up into a completely different level, seemingly overnight. And that has come with a lot of challenges. And she's received some very open criticism about the way she's dealt with some of the things that come with her rise to fame. The first thing that she really went through was some situations with fans. She had a really tough run-in with a fan that was just overly obsessed with her, finding her on the street, going to her family's house, finding her family's name, and just really close to really quite stalking of an experience. She got on her TikTok and talked about it and talked about how she doesn't necessarily want to engage with fans when she's not at work. Really spoke openly about it. When she's with her family, she wants to be with her family, and she wants that separation between her music persona and her real life persona. Her name isn't Chappell Roan, right? Like, she really wants to have this separation between the character she plays as a pop star and her personal life and keep those things separate. And she was really open about it on her social media about wanting to keep those things separate and wanting fans to leave her alone when she wasn't in an official work capacity moment. She received a ton of criticism about this. People saying that she should be happy that she's getting this attention, that she should be talking to her fans, that she owes it to them, and really got a lot of backlash for stepping up and saying that she wants that separation between her like pop stardom life and her personal life. I think she lost followers over it and fans and people who just think that she's whining and poor her and maybe she should just get over it. The next thing that really happened and kind of scandal she was involved in was related to her political affiliation. If you've seen in the news, and we have an election coming up, a lot of pop stars are being pressured to make sure they endorse a candidate for president. And so she, of course, was getting that pressure. And so she announced that she decided she wasn't going to be endorsing anyone in this presidential election. And of course, nobody was happy with that. She got a lot of backlash for not publicly choosing to support Kamala Harris as a presidential candidate. One thing that's really interesting about her is that she was actually invited to perform at the White House's Pride event. She turned it down because politically she did not agree with what the White House is doing in terms of the Israeli-Palestine war. It's something that's very important to her, and she didn't want to go perform there, make it seem like she supports what they're doing. It just wasn't comfortable for her. And I'm sure that has something to do with her not wanting to necessarily endorse a candidate. So she came out, she said she wouldn't endorse a particular candidate for president, and the internet went wild and really criticized her for not taking a stand and not sharing her political views. She then came on and shared that, yes, she was going to be voting for Kamala, but she can't endorse her, which is a very different thing. Voting and endorsing, I think, are two very different things. She couldn't actually endorse her for particular reasons. There's things she doesn't agree with, and she doesn't want to put her name behind someone without that. She really got a lot of criticism for that. So much so that it really started affecting her mental health, and she actually pulled out of going to a particular festival. She was supposed to perform at a festival like days after all of this happened. So she said, you know what? I'm not in the mental place that I can go do that performance. So she didn't go, and then faced even more criticism. People were angry with her, upset, saying, well, you have to go to work. That's not a reason to not perform. And so we watched this artist, and if you haven't listened to her music, you should. Her album, The Rise and Fall of the Midwest Princess, is just absolutely fantastic. We've got this figure who is an amazingly talented artist. She is an icon for the LGBTQ community and gives this representation that is desperately needed, to be honest, right? To just give people an artist that they can relate to and can speak from their point of view. It seems like no matter what she does, she's trying to live an authentic life and is seeing this criticism and this hurt of her career all along the way.
Part of this discussion is about looking at these examples of high achieving women or female identified people in our community, in our culture, the people that we look to for advisement, the people that we look to for inspiration, the people that we look to because we've put them on some kind of pedestal. Again, whether that's business, in their personal brand, being a celebrity, the fame that they've created for themselves. And what we're hoping to accomplish and do through this discussion is learn so that you can learn as you listen. You can look to these stories and we can help understand how we can then turn those lessons toward ourselves, toward our brands, towards our businesses, and what we are doing in the world and how we're showing up. It also hopefully helps spread the message and the narrative that dealing with these things are normal and that we should be handling them differently. So let's kind of break it down a little bit. So we're talking about a person who wants to keep their private identity separate from their public identity. And that's a boundary. That's a boundary that you can set for yourself in work and personal life, in business and home life, and think about those things separately. I think it's really an unfortunate situation that in our culture and in the world that we're living in, that there's so much pressure on stars, celebrities, actors, musicians, those people in the spotlight with paparazzi and people getting into their personal lives in a really nosy and unnecessary way. There's so much media attention that comes with being in the public eye already, with interviews, with premieres, with their news and media circuits that they have to do, with performing in the first place where they're getting the attention of fans, they're out there in the world, they're already subjecting themselves to that type of attention, which can be really detrimental to their mental health and to the way in which they see themselves and the way in which they engage with other people. And people don't take that into account. And it's really an unfortunate thing. And I could go off on this tangent for mental health and for wellness as a whole, but seeing celebrities struggle with mental health, it always just like drives me nuts when people are like, oh, poor you, you're famous. Oh, poor you, you have money. And I'm like, they're a person. Independent of how much wealth someone has, independent of how much influence someone has, that is a human being. And they struggle with insecurities, doubts, fears, shame, embarrassment, just like the rest of us. And they struggle with mental health, emotional anxiety, and other issues that we all deal with. And not only that, could you imagine if you took all of your personal issues and spotlighted them for the entire world to see on social media, on the internet, and in our news? So, that aside, we're thinking about creating boundaries. So, what does it look like for you as an individual as you start to become more vulnerable in the online space, as you're getting out there, as you're getting PR, you're getting featured in interviews, you're getting public attention in one way or another? How do you separate that boundary between this is my public persona and this is my private persona? And I want to be able to differentiate between the two. I think that everybody has that right to identify themselves in both ways and support that. And then you have this political narrative. And we've talked a little bit about this on the podcast and other episodes before. Ultimately, there's a lot of pressure on celebrities to speak up, to have a say, to use their platform for a specific reason. I think there is something to be said for pressure, right? Like if we want to see change, there is an amount of pressure that we're putting on our government officials, that we're putting on the people who have a say, who have sway, who have influence. But also, they have the right to make those choices. Yes or no. I'm going to support, I'm not going to support. And so the flack that this person, this woman is getting is really challenging to watch. Being able to differentiate between that private and that public, you have to decide as an individual, what are you going to say in your business? Are you going to talk about your political affiliations? Are you going to talk about the things that you care about? On one hand, that can be really positive because it creates more of a personal brand. It creates the niche. It creates the identity that you're working to draw people into. It creates more of that magnetic energy when you can polarize. And that can be a positive thing. And we've seen a lot of celebrities and a lot of famous people and a lot of brands and businesses lean into that. So if they affiliate with something, if they support something, if they have a certain mission or values that they're representing with how they're showing up in their brand and in their business, that will repel certain groups of people and that will attract certain groups of people. And that's a positive thing. So what Chappell Roan is doing is making those choices. And there is going to be some flack around that, but that is up to each and every one of us in our business and in our brands to find that representation and stand behind it.
And I think something for me that this situation really highlights is a lot of the double standard I think that we see between men and women. This election season, I've seen a lot of female musicians get pressured to endorse and share their political alignment. Taylor Swift is one of them. Like there was a lot of pressure put on her and lots of people talking about she hasn't endorsed Kamala yet. She hasn't endorsed Kamala yet. And like saying she's not going to because it's going to hurt her or she should because it's going to help her. And just lots of discourse around that. I don't hear anyone asking who Drake is voting for. Like who's talking about that? Nobody. We put a lot of pressure, I think, on women to be all and be everything that we don't put on men. So we want to know who they're voting for. Is that the right person? And we're going to hold them accountable for that. And so, yes, there's a point where it's our choice what we share. And then we have to face the pros and cons of our decisions as business owners. I do think that there's like more of a spotlight and an eye and an expectation on women to be doing those things that we kind of give men a pass for if they aren't willing to, share. And I think that same thing comes with taking a mental health day or not putting people's needs first. She's in the situation, she shares her political beliefs, she is ridiculed for it, needs a day off, and she's criticized for that. And I don't think we criticize men in the way for having to take a day off or not be able to do something. For her to basically be able to say, like, I am not here only for your enjoyment. I am a person, and I think we associate being a woman with our existences for the needs of others. And it's funny because I think if I had heard this story, I don't know, years ago, I probably would have been, well, she should do that concert because I would have been the person that would have done the concert to the detriment of my own mental or physical health. I would have done that because I felt like I should. I've done things really, really sick. I've done things when like I was broken down and depressed. Like I just keep going because I feel like that's the expectation on me as a woman to always be able to hold the pieces together, always be able to move forward. not be affected by what's going on around me. Not because I have to do these things for me, but because I have to do these things to hold up all of the people around me. And I feel like we're expected. If her doing that concert doesn't serve her in that moment, right? And it was a festival. So it's like if she canceled her own concert, I'd assume she would like give people money back for their tickets, right? As long as you're doing the right thing as best as you can, like you don't have to push through. But when we think of women as people who exist for the enjoyment of others, then we are going to criticize them for not existing for the enjoyment of others.
It is such a distinction between men and women, and what we experience is the pressure. There is so much pressure. And I'm not saying that men don't experience pressure, it's just in different ways. Meeting the needs and expectations of others, and then what we internalize because of that determines and dictates so much of our actions, behaviors, and what we do in this world. I was just having this conversation with a prospective client who is struggling with business and managing her employees because she feels like she needs to be everywhere and everything for everybody. She has 2 kids, she's got a partner, she's got 20 employees, she's managing this business and this life, and ultimately sacrificing. It's not to say that there aren't seasons that we go through in which we maybe compromise or sacrifice a little bit more to work toward a goal. But the idea is that you're not giving of yourself so fully and entirely that you don't enjoy, that you're not happy, that you're really just like slugging through the experience. I mean, ultimately, you want to enjoy each and every moment that you're living through, right? And so a lot of times we compromise, we sacrifice to the detriment of our own mental health, physical health, emotional health, psychological health, like future opportunity. Because a lot of the times when we compromise and sacrifice now, it burns us out. And that's the direction that we go. And then we either have to pull back completely and lose out on the opportunity of the now, or it's whatever future opportunity that we're saying no to because it was just too much. It was too overwhelming. It was too much. It was too something. It was too something on us. And it just put so much pressure and so much expectation. And we internalize that. There's a lot coming at us from all these different directions. And as women, it's harder to set that boundary. It's harder to differentiate and say, this is me. This is my choice. This is what I want. So much of my story is interlaced with meeting other people's needs for so long and feeding into what other people wanted that I got to a point in my life where I didn't know what I wanted. Like I had no idea what that looked like. And so therefore, nothing was making me happy. I wasn't satisfied, even doing activities that I used to enjoy, because I really didn't truly know what I wanted. I didn't know what I was working toward. I didn't know what it was that was driving me and my motivation and my why. And so there are these pressures, and we've got to find ways to deal with them. We've got to find ways to differentiate. We've got to find ways to also be okay and be neutral, because so much of this conversation about Chappell Roan is based around the criticism, the flack that she's getting. And it's easy to make decisions when you don't have to think about it affecting other people. But these decisions do affect other people. And when that effect happens, whether that's anger or frustration or blame or criticism or vitriol being thrown at you, that definitely will affect the way that you engage in your decision-making process. And so we've got to think about how we can differentiate from those things, how we can be more neutral to the outcome of what those decisions look like, and how we can guard ourselves emotionally against any of the outpouring of feedback or criticism that comes along with those activities and actions.
I'm a big fan of her. I love her music. So of course, like I like want to side with her and like root for her. I think there is a level of that all of these situations probably could have been handled better from like a PR perspective. I think the criticism would have been there no matter what, but a lot of times you can manage those things by how you message them, how you share them with the world and all of that. But for her, I'd imagine, and I don't know like all of these details, but she was not at a level of fame where she probably had like a full-time PR person. She probably had a PR person that was like with her label that like oversaw what she did versus like her own actual dedicated PR person. This is probably a little bit new to her because of this sort of seemingly overnight success. So it's something she's going to have to manage. having a PR strategy around these choices may have helped the backlash and all of that. But on the other side, though, you look at someone like Taylor Swift, who's also highly criticized in all of that. She has a dedicated PR team, and everybody says everything she does is calculated because it's all, you can see the PR in there. So when she did come out and endorse Kamala, everyone's like, who are you going to endorse? Who you are going to endorse? Pressuring her to endorse. Then she finally did. And they're like, oh, it's just a PR move. So it's like you kind of can't win. You have to be like authentically you, but in the right way that everybody is gonna approve of. And that's absolutely impossible. I think about for myself when I was working in the corporate world and trying to like break through the glass ceiling and like get the promotions and stuff. I had to be very strategic about how I talked about my personal life and what I looked like and how I act to be able to get those promotions and roles. And you can do it, but it's also hard. Like, I remember one of the strategies that I did was if I ever had to leave work early for something related to my child, I just stopped giving the why. I would just say, like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to be done at 3 today. Or I'm taking PTO tomorrow. I never told people why I was leaving early, where I was, or what I was doing for PTO because I didn't want to be branded as a mom who was like not focused on work and focused on being a mom. So I just never gave reasons. And like, it's kind of unfortunate. And it worked. Like, I think it helped me and helped my position at that company, but it also is like sad. We can't be open and honest and vulnerable and like share our struggles and still be seen as like strong and influential.
Yeah, I think what we're dealing with are the societal and cultural expectations, norms that we have in place and trying to fight against them. I mean, part of what we talk about on this podcast is creating a different culture, creating different businesses, having women and leaders in place that trickle down, change the way that we engage in those kinds of ways, right? Like creating businesses and environments in which a woman feels comfortable expressing that she is a high achieving person in the workplace, but also a really incredible mom and balances the two. And so I think there's that cultural, societal expectation norm that we're constantly fighting against and working to change as a whole. And then also what we can do as individuals. And I think one of the things I want to extract and pull out here is for you yourself, you are putting yourself in a place of vulnerability by being seen. If you are creating content in the world, you're putting yourself out there to be vulnerable. If you are building a brand, if you're creating a business, if you are a founder, if you are looking to be a coach and connect with people in any way, especially in the digital space, you are putting yourself out there to be perceived, to be judged, to be criticized, and to be spoken about in ways that you may really like and bring in and honor, and then other ways that are probably not so great. And so that takes our inner ability to be okay with that. It takes breaking down some of those barriers, those insecurities, those doubts, those fears, the expectation of what you should look like, how you should sound, how you have to get everything in order to make it perfect or get it done or do it this way. So each of us individually can kind of work through that and navigate those experiences and try to overcome them so that you feel comfortable getting yourself out there and know when it's okay to delete the comment, get rid of that person, block the person, change the environment that you're speaking into, like avoid the places that are going to be really hard on you and then not feed into how that's going to impact your emotional and mental health because we let those things in and we let them fester. We think about the client feedback. We think about what that comment said and we let it take us to that negative place. And so we have to be able to prepare ourselves for that, to work in a way that is going to help you sustain as you're creating content, as you're being vulnerable, and also show up authentically while still curating a persona, because you can do both. You don't have to break down all the barriers and show everything about your personal life in every, painstaking detail in order to be connect worthy or in order to be relatable to your audience. But you can be authentic and genuine and show up candidly while also still creating that boundary and having a persona that you kind of curate and determine this is how I want to be in the public space. And that's okay. And you can do that.
Yeah, and I think this is where a lot of the times we've talked a lot about like mindset comes in. Because when you make a choice to be a certain way, you're going to have to accept however people react. But I think when, at least I've experienced, when I get into the mindset, when I stop being worried that my actions are going to be perceived negatively by people, people do perceive them less negative. Can't tell you the science. I don't know why it is, but when I say I'm going to act this way because this is how I want to act and it's who I am and people are going to like it. They're going to respond well. They actually do respond better. And when I'm feeling insecure and like, I don't know if I should do it this way or something like that, they do respond worse. So I think showing up in a way that I'm going to be unapologetically myself and people are still going to like me does work. Like, I don't know how to even explain that, but I feel like it does work. And maybe it's because the people who aren't going to like you, then they don't get deep enough with you to not like you because you're being that person all the time.
Where our attention goes, energy flows, right? That cliche saying. And it's the RAS, the reticular activating system, is like what we put attention toward is going to show up more in our lives. If we get a negative comment, we delete it, we move on with our day, it's not going to feel like such a weight. It's not going to feel as persistent in our lives. If we get a negative comment and then we fixate it on for the rest of the day, it could just literally be that one comment. But to you, it seems like such a big deal. The weight of it is a lot heavier. The presence of it is so much more in your mind and in your energy and how you're showing up. And you're paying more attention to that one negative comment than the 5 positive comments because that's where your attenergy.
Attenergy. I like that.
That's a
That's where
word.
your attenergy is.
That's where your attention and energy is going now. So it's about what we focus on, where our priorities are, where our attention is, where we're allowing our subconscious and conscious minds to focus on. And that focus will determine and dictate our success, our levels of happiness, the way in which we enjoy things, like how we perceive ourselves and what that's going to determine for our actions into the future. Because if you perceive yourself as someone who's going to get a negative comment, who people are going to push back on, what criticism is going to be there, and then you're afraid to record the content and get it out in the world, that's going to push back your ability to reach people. That's going to push back your business growth, your scale, all of those things. It's all intertwined and it's all connected. And we have to, in some way, we have to balance what's happening out here, society, culture, norms, pressures, expectations, and then what's happening in here, how we navigate our own dialogue, what we're thinking, saying to ourselves, which then determine those actions, those beliefs, the way in which we're showing up in the world. And then we create the society, expectations, and norms. So it's this beautiful cycle of how we're feeding in one to the other. And we can all co-create that and we can all work on that for ourselves and improve it in our own personal lives as well.
Yeah, and as you were talking, Michelle, something really just like clicked in my head. So I'm really glad we had this conversation today. And with what you're saying is that as women, we're kind of conditioned to think of ourselves, right, and how other people value us. How we serve people. There is that like cultural conditioning to be something that's pleasing to someone else. In our mindset, of course, when someone is unhappy with us, it's going to affect us. And that's where our attention is going to go because we're taught our value is in what that person thinks of me. My value is in if my boss thinks I'm valuable, if my husband is pleased with me, if my parents think I'm a good kid. And I don't think that is the same for boys. Like, and I think of like little boys in school, like when you get your reviews from kids and from your teachers, it's like, oh, she's such a pleasure to have in class. And that's like the best thing a girl could be, is a pleasure to have in class. When you're not a pleasure to have in class and you get that feedback, your attention is sucked there. Oh no, I'm not a pleasure to be around. I have to get there. But if we can sort of train and change our mindsets to say, actually, my goal in life is to not exist, to be a pleasure for everyone. My goal is to grow my business, or my goal is to be the biggest pop star in the world, or my goal is whatever my goal is. And we start actually assessing the way we are in the world based on that versus the expectations and criticisms and thoughts of others, we're going to get the results we want.
Yeah, it's that idea of being liked is like, I think women are predispositioned, programmed, educated, raised in a way to want to be liked by other people as opposed to what it means for us to like ourselves. And we do so many things that are fixated on pleasing others, just in the way that you described. And so I think that this is a unique opportunity for each of us to reflect on, how are we showing up in the world? Are we doing it because we want to? Are we doing it for our health, for our peace of mind, for our well-being? Are we doing it for our goals and what we're working toward? Are we muting ourselves in some way so that we fit into the picture, the ideal, the identity that other people perceive us to be? Are we reaching for things that they put in our path that they want us to accomplish and move toward? And so I think when we can liberate ourselves from that pressure and those expectations, become more neutral to the outcome of what we're working toward in the first place, and then recognize our own internal value, independent of any accomplishments, accolades, goals, how we're showing up in the world, whether that's followers, income, clients, salesmate, etc. It's not to say that those things aren't positive or good markers of helping us reach bigger goals or move toward impact or what we're trying to accomplish in the world. But none of that dictates or determines our own internal value. I think once we can make that switch, I think that changes the game for all of us. And then that allows us to determine different priorities. It allows us to change the way we invest our time and reframes our energy and the way in which we're able to embody either alignment, happiness, joy, satisfaction, and peace of mind.
Well, thank you so much for listening in on this discussion. Michelle and I are really interested in doing more dives like this into high achieving women, the struggles they face, the criticism they face, and really breaking down what it means for us as we show up into the world. So if you know of a situation or a woman you think we should talk about, just send us a DM on our Instagram accounts and we'd be happy to add it to our list of things to discuss.